Hello, this is Zeus with the Friends of Zeus Podcast. Tonight we've got, first of all, let me introduce everybody. We got Mike to my top left. Tom is just below him. Raise your hand, guys. Let's see here. Jack is in the X-Files chic screen there, and Jason is in the forest. And then our guest tonight is John Paul, and I'm sorry, your last name again?
Mac Isaac.
Mac Isaac. That is a handful. So you can find us on Friends of Zeus Podcast on Facebook, as well as YouTube. There's, as I always say, rumblings on Rumble. And we are on Spotify as well. All of them under Friends of Zeus Podcast. We do have a website that we're working on right now. I'm not even going to go into it because the website name, the web address is too confusing. But you can reach us also at FOZ@friendsofzeuspodcast.com. Outside of that, Mike is going to be pretty much driving the show tonight. So I'm going to roll it on over to you and
hopefully not off a cliff. Well, we'll keep it pretty loose tonight. John Paul, sometimes we have slides and things like that, but we're not doing any of that stuff tonight, so it's pretty low key. Just to introduce John Paul, Mac Isaac, and also, like Zeus said, we have Jack and Jason and Zeus and Tom and myself. And first, just want to say thanks a lot for coming on. Tom was asking me, he was like, how do you know, or how'd you get a hold of John Paul and all that stuff? So, and honestly, when I first asked, it was just a shot in the dark. I mean, basically, we're just interested in your story and kind of like the human side of it. And, you know, like I told you previously, we're not hardcore investigative reporters or anything like that. So, you know, there's plenty. You've done, I don't know how many. I mean, do you know how many interviews you've done over the last 2 years? Could you guess?
More than I could ever possibly imagine I would have to endure. It's not a part. It's something I hope I never ever get used to.
Oh, interesting.
Hey, Mike, let me jump in. Before you start, why don't you start by telling our audience who John Paul is?
That's a good point, Jack. Jack's very good with that sort of thing.
Because he's not a household name.
Take off
really,
from
so.
Okay, so
actually, time out. One other thing I'm noticing is everybody showing it as the person speaking popping up on the screen.
No, I'm fine on the
just
recording.
on your settings.
I just want to make sure that it wasn't happening for everybody. Okay, sorry.
We'll get the technical department to work on that in post. So
we'll have Rogan's guys work on that.
Yeah,
for us.
They're down the hall. We're both on Spotify. We're good. We're buddies. So for all of our viewers that are out there, John Paul is the owner of the Mac Shop in Wilmington, I believe, Wilmington, Delaware. He is the former. I didn't know if you were going to be reopening it or not, so I didn't want to say, but former used to be the owner of the Mac Shop in Wilmington, Delaware. And some of you, if you watch like mainstream corporate media, you may have never heard of this story, but many people have heard of the story of a laptop that the current president's son had dropped off at John Paul's shop to be worked on, never came back to pick it up. And John Paul turned this laptop or its contents over to the FBI, and the contents eventually, made their way out, released through various means. And there's a lot of controversial and disturbing things that came out, that were discovered on that laptop. And John Paul can tell the story, but basically things kind of went sideways for him after that. Yes, Jason. What?
I was just chiming in. Allegedly.
Everything's
alleged.
Everything is alleged. So, again, we'll get into kind of the story of what happened with you, John Paul. I mean, I was talking to mainly Tom and Zeus before this, but Jason and Jack, I think understand too. Really our goal with this is just to hear your story and give you a platform to talk and say what you want to say. I mean, obviously we're curious people. I mean, we have questions too, which we'll ask. But we're really not looking to get into nitty gritty particulars of, like I know there's things on there between Hunter and people in the Ukrainian government and things. That's not really what we're after right now, because that's, for one, that's been well talked about, and two, I don't think that you're a subject matter expert, John Paul, on geopolitics. I mean, we aren't. We talk about it, but to me, that's not even the most interesting part of this story. I think your story touches on so many different things that our society is dealing with right now, that we just want to give you a voice to be able to say it, because you're so used to having to answer questions all the time. I just kind of wanted you to have a chance to speak, freely as you see fit. So I guess to get it started, my first question would be, could you give us your version of events of, I guess, how this all got started? Take it from, like, you're eating a sandwich at lunch and then what happens, or whatever.
Well, it all started for me April 12th, 2019. About 10 minutes before the shop was to close, Hunter walked in with 3 MacBooks, or MacBook Pros. All 3 were suffering from liquid damage. One was a write-off. I couldn't do anything with it. Apple solders the drives to the logic board, so if it's destroyed, there's nothing that can come off of it. The other one just had a faulty keyboard, so I gave him a keyboard so he could get around his password and then recover his own data. The third unit did require a check-in. The third unit had a Beau Biden Foundation sticker. So I don't know, I assumed that it was his dead brother's computer and he just wanted his memories off of it. So I kind of felt bad for the guy because he was wasted. And normally data recovery is $200. So I cut him a deal with $85 standard labor for me to get the machine to an operational state where I could recover the data off of it to our store server. When the recovery was complete, he would come in with an external drive, drop it off, I'd transfer the data back, he would pay, and then go his separate ways. So it didn't quite work out that way. I recovered the data. In the process of verifying the data, that's when I was made aware of a lot of his hobbies, and then ended up also seeing some other financial documents that just kind of like, oh, this is a lot of money. This thing's just a big hot mess. So I was nervous, but his dad wasn't president, or hadn't announced, not was president. His dad hadn't announced his candidacy yet. So this was just some drunk guy with porn and a bunch of crap on his computer. So I recovered the data, called him up. He dropped off a drive, transferred the data back. So he's actually in the shop twice. A lot of people forget that he came back in, dropped off the drive, called him up on a Monday, sent him a Square secure payment request for the $85. Then I called him repeatedly over the next month. And of course, during this time, his dad announces his candidacy. I'm starting to get concerned that there's going to be a Secret Service guy that's going to come into the shop, because for all I know, Hunter was still in possession of a document that said I was allowed to look on his hard drive. So if somebody saw that document, I was in trouble, because they would know that I had witnessed the data. And so that was my initial concern. As the summer progressed and Burisma and Hunter Biden was in the news, I was starting to get more and more concerned that there might be criminal activity that's relevant to an existing case. So, and again, out of an abundance of caution, I was afraid that somebody was going to come looking for this thing. So I ended up reaching out to my father in the late summer of 2019 and said, hey, look, can you help me out? Can you reach out to the FBI in Albuquerque? Let them know that I have this. I just want it out of my shop, and I want some level of protection. Should somebody come looking for me, at least this is on the record, this is on the books. I believed in the system enough to want to go to the FBI, but I still didn't trust the FBI enough to walk into the Wilmington office. So my father's a retired colonel in the Air Force. I figured he would have more weight or carry more gravitas with his credentials than I would. And there was quite a bit of distance. So I figured I had a little bit of the safety in case the FBI didn't have my interest in their agenda. Well, the FBI initially kicked him out, told him to lawyer up and don't come back. They did
Wow.
take a copy of the paperwork. They refused to take a copy of the drive. As the fall started to creep in and the impeachment proceedings or hearings were going on, I was getting more and more concerned that the reason for Zelensky's phone call was justified because of what I had seen. And I'm not a political analyst, but I can definitely see a private Ukrainian citizen asking for somebody's dad to step in to put pressure on the Ukrainian government so that they don't have to give back that $5.5 billion that they took. So it's kind of, I can see that there was something going on that justified a phone call for the impeachment. So now I really wanted to talk to the FBI. I really wanted to get this out there. Luckily, the FBI reached out to my father in October. They ended up coming to my house in mid-November to talk to me. And then they eventually came to the shop in December 9th, 2019 to collect the laptop and the drive and any related paperwork. And then they called me a couple times for technical support, which I thought was kind of odd. I expected that to be put in an evidence locker and shipped down to a lab outside of Langley or something outside of DC. And instead they were calling me for help to access the data. I really didn't think of it too much. They kept calling to see if somebody had been in to collect, like they were almost anticipating somebody looking for it. They did instruct me that if somebody did come in asking for it, that I would to stall them and then give them a call so that they could return it. And then that's really one of the last big red flags was, wait a second, how could they return this to Hunter if somebody comes looking for it, if this isn't being used as any form of evidence for an impeachment that's literally a month away? And yeah, I figured the FBI wasn't going to help me out, and I decided that I needed to enlist my father and my uncle, who's also a retired colonel in the Air Force, to go to members of Congress to knock on doors to see if anybody would listen. Because now I know I'm in trouble because the FBI knows that I had this, and if the FBI is protecting the Bidens, then who's to say somebody's going to say, "Hey, Joe, there's this kid that's trying to get rid of your son's dirty laundry." You know, I had never ever crossed my mind to go to the press or go to the media. This was something that I felt there was a proper, I always call it the chain of command, to get this to the proper authorities so that they could be acted on, and then I could get some level of protection. But by the summer of 2020, and I wasn't getting a lot of feedback from anyone. Everybody was so afraid of Russian collusion that congressmen's empirical guard kind of prevented us from actually making contact with anybody that would listen to our story. So I reached out to Rudy Giuliani's office in August of 2020, and finally somebody there was willing to listen. Bob Costello contacted me back. We exchanged a couple phone calls, and I mailed him a copy of the drive on August 28th, 2020. And then it was out of my hands at that point. I had gotten it to what I viewed at that point in time, the authorities. This was a lawyer of the President of the United States. If the Justice Department had failed me and Congress had failed me, I figured I could try the executive branch. So I actually got some success there, and then the rest is history.
So at that time, when Giuliani's office has a copy, so the FBI have the original and Giuliani has a copy. Is there anyone besides you at that point that has a copy from you, or is it just the FBI and Giuliani at that point?
Well, I gave a copy to my father.
Okay.
So he could give it to the FBI. That was the first time the FBI was off.
So you imaged these drives, right? You just did.
I did a manual recovery from the drive, or from the failing Mac. It took several attempts because it was a power issue and it kept going down. Once I got all this data combined, I saved it, and then I was able to clone that to an external drive. And then from that, I made my clone. For my father, I made a clone for a friend of mine that should anything happen to me, her instructions, and this was back in late summer of 2019, where before we reached out to the FBI, in case something bad happened with the FBI, she was to hand deliver that drive to Rudy Giuliani's office, because he was in the Ukraine at that particular point in time researching exactly what I was sitting on. So I figured, here's a lawyer that knows probably more about this information than anybody else on the planet besides Hunter and Igor Kolomoisky. So, you know, he was my not get out of jail free card, because I never really panned out, but he was almost my safety net back then. And then it turns out I probably should have just saved the whole world a lot of trouble by just giving it to him in the first place. But
So just out of curiosity, and I'll ask because I don't want to tell you what my assumption is because I'm just curious. So if I'm you, or why not just take the laptop and like throw it in a dumpster? Is it because there's a paper trail?
There was. So I don't know. I was raised to, like, I come from a military family. I love my country. This is what you're supposed to do. If you see something, you're supposed to say something. And I felt that this was topical with what was in the news, that I was definitely sitting on something that was important. Initially, it was out of fear. You know, I was afraid that somebody would come looking for me.
Yeah,
Somebody,
and that's where I was going, because my thought, and I've thought about this, is because my first thing was like, man, why wouldn't, this was before we ever talked, this was back when I was first reading about this, like what would I do, you know, in that situation? But if you throw it away and people know that you have it, or you suspect that people know that you have it, and then they come and they want it and you don't have it,
I'm in trouble.
that could be a problem.
Yeah, I thought it was the right thing to do, and I still think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I did it out of fear. I'd say initially probably 75% fear, 25% patriotism. You know,
I mean, this sounds like straight out of House of Cards. Was that the name of the show? The Kevin Spacey?
yeah, I hope not. A lot of people die in that. I don't.
Yeah,
No, no.
that was kind of a rough show. Yeah.
It's just, I mean, this would be a great script. I can tell you that. It's a fascinating story. It's kind of just something fell into your lap. And like I said, it's like one of those old 80s political flicks where all these tiny little, you know, machinations connect, and then all of a sudden here you are. A pretty big news story. Like I don't very much envy you for the
Yeah, absolutely.
for being at the center of this.
So what happens? So you know, when the New York Post, I'm assuming that they come to interview. This is, you know, they published their story October of 2020, which, you know, that's when the rest of the world kind of found out about this. And is that the first time your name was released to the public as being associated with this?
Well, I was never supposed to be made public. When I reached out to Rudy Giuliani's office and I spoke with Bob Costello, I was very adamant. Rudy was never to even know my name. I didn't want anybody. I was referred to as Bob's guy. I still thought at that point in time that I would still have my business. I would still be able to stay in my house and have a place in my community. And I kept trying to be unseen in all this. And I had the poop scared out of me.
It's all right.
On like the Sunday before the New York Post broke the story, because I'm working in the shop. I have a buddy of mine over. We're having a couple beers. I'm helping him migrate his Mac, and the shop's closed. Like, blinds are closed, everything. There's a knock on the door. There's a reporter. I opened the door and she's like, yeah, I'm from the New York Post. I'm like, how the hell did you find me? And she's like, it's my job. Bob told me you would be here. And I'm like, so I kind of was really cagey because I did not want
Bob.
I know, right? So I call up Bob. I'm like, what the fuck, over? You know?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to anybody. It's like, oh, it's okay. They have to verify you're real. They're still gonna, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be safe. And then of course I wake up Thursday. Well, shit, I didn't sleep that much the night of the 13th. So the day before the story broke, because I'm sitting in my shop almost exactly 10 minutes before the shop closes, and then my phone rings. I answer the phone, and it's this guy. He says, hi, I'm George Maceras. I'm Hunter Biden's lawyer. I understand he left a computer with you in 2017. Do you still have it? And I'm just like, I don't know, it felt like an eternity, but what the FBI told me to do kicked in. So I was just like, ooh, 2017, that's an awful long time for us to hold on to something that's been abandoned. Let me go and collect your information. I'll contact you tomorrow. I have to go off site. And I had him email me, which is probably a quick thinking thing. I'm glad he did, because then I had proof that he acknowledged that, on the night before this post story that
Smart.
he was off by 2 years, but I didn't really expect Hunter to remember too much. But yeah, the story broke. Unfortunately, the New York Post forgot to blur out the shop's name in the paperwork. So people were pretty quick to figure that out.
Oh yeah.
I was, gosh, I think one of the hardest days of my life was October 14th, 2020, because this is not a life I've ever wanted. And next thing you know, I'm cornered in my shop with the media, and I didn't know somebody was recording me. I'm just I don't know what to say. Nobody coached me. Nobody gave me any advice for this, because I think we all hoped that I was just going to be, you get to be an anonymous source all day long on certain mainstream shows.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't I be an anonymous source here? And, but towards the end of the day, I started to realize that I don't think my life's really going to be the same. And about 2.5 weeks later, I had to close the shop and get out of Delaware.
And that was that for just generally, or like, was there specific reasons why you had to get out of there?
Well, the mainstream and social media did such a good job of blocking it. I was still busy, and people were coming in like, why is tomatoes thrown at your store? Or why is there a cop parked in front of your shop? And I didn't feel like explaining to them, because I know they probably wouldn't understand or appreciate it. But as the days progressed, I started to get visited by individuals coming into the shop that didn't come in with a computer, and luckily it was busy enough that I always had somebody there. But I could tell that it was getting a little dangerous. And
Wow.
yeah, so, and then people started realizing, and then people just stopped coming in.
Man.
Were there any repeat figures throughout this story, people that you ended up seeing more than once, or?
What regards? Like
Just in general throughout the story, were there people, seemingly benign, or maybe more nefarious, or just in general people that you constantly kept bumping into? Or
well, initially it's people would come out of the woodwork and want to help me, and we can offer you this. And when I was on the run in Colorado, I was kind of bouncing around. I wasn't staying in one place too long for the initial couple, like about a month or so. And I met up with this one group that wanted to provide me security and wanted to, give me a lawyer, and I had a lawyer, but they wanted a lot of, they were offering a lot of things. And I finally was like, this is great. What do you want? Oh, as long as your agenda and our agenda stays in parallel.
Jeez.
And then we're like, okay, well, I'll think about it. And then, hey, so do you have a copy of the drive? And then it's like, now I understand why you want to be my friend. So I got a lot of that. It was really, it's neat for me, neat's a horrible word, but it is kind of cool, because what happened with that laptop peeled the Band-Aid off of our state-run media and our state-run social media.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to see the reaction, and then after the fact, like I was getting phone calls from former executive vice presidents of Fox letting me know that the new word on the street is that it was the Israelis that gave you the laptop, not the Russians. So it's like to have, and then to sit and watch a hearing where Zuckerberg says the FBI warned Twitter and Facebook and Google to be prepared for a document dump in early September, which was the weekend after I overnighted a drive to Rudy Giuliani's lawyer. So who's getting bugged here? I want to see the FISA court for who was being spied on. Was it me, or was it the president of the United States' lawyer? And all these questions now can be asked, because now that I'm no longer a Russian agent, thank you, New York Times, for clearing that up.
Really, you're a Scottish agent.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what the GSU is putting out. We're in trouble. They got us all. So, but yeah, I'm hoping that the big takeaway for everybody, once they start to realize that this wasn't, I never wanted this to be an October surprise. It was maybe October of 2019 surprise, not some election.
Right.
What the lawyer, the president of the United States did with that drive is out of my control. I did what I had to do. And I stand by that. Would I have done it sooner to save us all a lot of hassle? Absolutely. But I would have still lost everything, I'm sure. But that's just the world we live in today.
Man,
and who could have predicted? Who could have predicted at the time? You know what I mean? That what it would, I don't know. You're right about this being this event as far as like pulling the bandage off or the Band-Aid or exposing, you know, big tech and media and what I call big politics, or, you know, the elite or whatever, and the collusion between everything that they do. I mean, it went from it really got ugly fast. Like they're just flat out lying, and they're just flat out shutting this story down. Like they're just pulling the plug on it and saying you can't talk about it, and if you do, then they shut you down too, you know, as an individual. And if you're a newspaper, the oldest newspaper in the country, they'll shut you down too. I mean, I mean, it sent shivers through me. I mean, just seeing it happen, I was like, I can't believe I'm seeing this. And I didn't know who you were, that I didn't know all kinds of details, but what I did know was that there were things that you could not say, and that's frightening.
Well, I didn't know what I could say. You know,
well, I'm just anyone. I mean, no one could talk about this story. It was chilling.
It's Orwellian at times. Like you know, I right here, man, I'm charging it as we're talking. But there's part of me, we've talked about this recently, where I'm just we're too connected and we're too affected by that connection. Like you know, we're doing this show, and I'm, you know, there's part of me that's saying, you know, I hope they don't cancel us because of whatever, but I'm like, screw it. As you can see, I got the railroad behind me. I'm behind you, like, you know, 100%. But you know, it's so disturbing where we're at right now. I want to go back to where kids were out on the playgrounds. We left in the morning at sunrise and came back when the lights came on. This is way too insidious of a world sometimes for me.
Yeah, well, we've talked about it, Mike. You just hit on it. With this story, like if you go back to October of 2020, and like we've talked on this podcast a lot about the unholy trinity of media, big tech, and the government. And this was just the worst example because, you know, y'all know who I voted for. So when this story came out, I thought, well, there you go, slam dunk, right? Like this is going to sink him. And then when the New York Post got banned by Twitter, and you couldn't even talk about this story. And then to think about being you, because you were outed, like you were not an anonymous source. So you become like persona non grata on your own, and you didn't do anything wrong, John Paul. Like that's pretty obvious. Like your motivation at that point is this is the right thing to do. And a lot of people wouldn't have bothered. You know, they really wouldn't have. So I want to say thank you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Well, there's I get a little bit of a vibe that you were kind of like, just get this away from me. Like it's uranium. Like, go power your plant. I don't need this.
Yeah, initially I like when the FBI came into my shop, I was so excited because this nightmare was over. I would have some level of protection. There would be a paper trail showing that I handed this over. I had my concerns, and I felt like that was a big, huge weight lifted off my shoulder. But then as time progressed, then I realized I'm afraid of what the Bidens might do, or the Secret Service, and because I had already by that time witnessed through in the laptop where the Secret Service was quite happy to bail Hunter out on numerous occasions at different levels, whether it's taking guns out of trash cans or you know, waking him up in a hotel after a hooker's ran off with his credit card. So it's kind of, I was worried about that, but then I realized if there is this, and I hate the term deep state because that gets everybody wound up, but if there is an element of the Justice Department that was protecting the Bidens, it probably doesn't just stop at the Justice Department. So now I have to be afraid of the FBI. I have to be, there's something that I read on the laptop that was made reference to Little Creek and looking for people to do due diligence that you're not going to find in a Google search. And Little Creek, I actually called my dad up because it kind of rang a bell. I didn't know what. He's like, oh, well, the Little Creek Naval Joint Base, and they do a lot of training. And then the SEAL Team 6 does their training up the street, and then further up the street is the farm, which is the CIA. And then I remembered that Joseph Cofer Black was Hunter got him on the board of directors in 2016. And if the board of directors for the CIA, or if the board of directors for Burisma is a position is a reward for something you've done, then what did Joseph Cofer Black do to get on the board? And that put a really big chill down my spine, because there's, it's one thing to have the Justice Department after you, potentially aware of your activities. The last thing you want is the CIA, because they don't, it's one thing to get put in a cell. It's another thing to be put in a black hole somewhere. So, all these fears were there, and they were definitely, they were a lot, but I also value my life, and I knew that doing the right thing and paying it would pay off, and I have to do this. And I think by August, though, after getting rejected so many times and trying to hide behind my father and my uncle, I kind of grew a pair, if you will. I think that at that point in time, I needed to replace fear with courage. I needed to stop trying to be in the shadows with this thing that I'm trying to quietly get rid of, and I need to get somebody's attention. I honestly feel that if I had reached out to members of Congress and name dropped and was very specific with the content, that maybe I would have been able to get their attention sooner. So I basically grew a pair, and I picked up the phone, and I stepped out from the shadows, and I think I traded fear for courage at that point in time. And then I even told Bob Costello, I was like, you know what, I'd be okay with losing everything if this goes south, but as long as there's justice, then I'll feel like I did the right thing. And I was rewarded, the country was rewarded with justice, because this isn't about me. This is, it's unfortunate that we live in a country that we elect these people, and it's a playground to them.
Yeah.
And it's not right. And I've listened to a voice memo that Hunter was talking to a guy named Greg. I believe it was about getting his dad in front of John Podesta to kiss his ring to get the nomination and basically bypass the quote unquote fringe candidates. And he said, he was like, this isn't about, this is bigger than my dad. He has to run because of not just Donald Trump, but what Donald Trump represents and what it represents to the DC way of life. And I was like, that sounds about accurate. And that sounds swampy as hell.
It's interesting. I mean, there's a lot, there's just a lot to talk about with this, but when I'm thinking of things, I just want to mention them. There's a lot said about, well, how did John Paul get this laptop, and why would Hunter Biden just take it into the shop, and why would he never pick it up? And your point, John Paul, and I'd forgotten about those stories that were out with the Secret Service that were basically, janitor duty for this guy's, whatever, all his hijinks and everything. It's like, of course he would just do that and forget that where he left it, or never go back and pick it up. I mean, it fits right in with his MO on a lot of stuff. So it's not surprising at all. I mean, it fits right in.
Yeah, I get a lot of flack where people say, oh, well, Hunter wasn't even living in Delaware at the time. And I'm like, that's funny. I've seen an Uber receipt from JFK to Philly on March 19th. So it's like he was in the area. He knows he was in the area. This was never about Hunter. I get it. There's a black sheep in every family, and I
was just gonna say that. You got Roger Clinton, you got Billy, you got Jimmy Carter's brother Billy, you got John F. He had his own little flings and stuff. He didn't need to go outsource his problems, but you know.
I'm just saying when the media and people that, or elements that don't want this to be true, when they start needling in and nitpicking and trying to cast doubt on things, it's like, no, this completely falls in line with that behavior. I'm not coming down on Hunter as an individual. I'm just saying it fits the behavior. And the other thing I found and continue to find interesting is how many questions you get, John Paul, and how your feet are held to the fire. And yet there doesn't seem to be, the people who are accountable to us, their feet are not held to the fire. You as an individual citizen have to, did you cross your T? Did you dot your I? Exactly what happened? What form was used? And it's like, they miss the forest for the trees on a lot of this.
Yeah, I experienced it with, so Senator Grassi and Johnson released the Hunter Biden report, I think September 23rd or something like that in 2020. And I read through the report and I saw a lot of what Hunter got, but I didn't see what he was paid for. So I figured I knew a lot of those answers. So I filled out a whistleblower form on Senator Johnson's website. And after a little bit back and forth with them, I ended up on a phone call with two NSA guys and somebody from Johnson's office, where for about 2 hours, they grilled me on being a Russian agent. And I thought I was going to talk to them. So I had like my little folders all laid out. I was going to go through and spill the beans and let them know everything that I discovered. And they never asked me about the contents of the laptop. They only cared about, have I ever worked for a foreign agency, or have I ever worked for a foreign government?
Wow.
Though that seems to me, if I was going to be, a little conspiratorial, that almost seems like they did that just to say that they did that, so that they could, without lying, say, yes, we investigated him and never really thought it.
They could always do that, though. I mean, they could have done that and also asked for the other information that he had. I mean, going back to what you said about the FBI wanting you to call if someone came to pick it up, or no, they wanted you to, they called you for help in getting the information. That seems suspicious too, almost like they were, I mean, again, no offense, John Paul, I know you know what you're doing, but I gotta believe the FBI has technicians that can do stuff too. I would imagine, I mean, I hope, but it almost seems like they wanted to keep that line of communication open with you as well, which, I mean, that does seem
Possibly
like due diligence. I mean, that I would expect an investigator to do something like that.
Why would they go to the guy that they suspect of being a Russian spy to help them fix computer problems they've got? Right?
It's the government.
It's shady. It's just shady.
It's like kill the messenger, man. It's like, again, it's like this intent, like John Paul gets put under the spotlight, but like all the other people that I would like to see put under the spotlight, they're not put under the spotlight. That's very curious to me.
I got to say this was me. And I got to the point where John got to, I would have copies of this hard drive in every state,
behind every tree, right? Like
they would be, they would
Halloween, be, like giving it out to kids at the door, like, here you go.
People ask me, like, am I going to sue the New York Post because they accidentally leaked my information? And I'm like, no, they did me a favor. I wanted this. I didn't want to go to the press, but I knew that the story had to get out there, because if it didn't, and everything would get swept under the carpet, and then I would disappear, because people at the FBI knew about me. The Bidens had to know about me by then. The story had to break. I just didn't want to be a part of going to the press, because I think the press can be very messy. And plus I knew that they would probably only show the sex and the drugs and the rock and roll and the stuff that I was concerned about, which was ultimately this nation should never have had to endure the impeachment, its third ever impeachment. So I knew that's going to sell less than naked pictures of Hunter. So I knew the press would find a way to. And then I just didn't expect what happened, that complete lockstep unilateral effort from every facet of mainstream media and social media all working at the same time. I mean, the story broke it. I think I saw it hit the internet at like 6:30 in the morning, and by 9:30, nobody in the world could talk about it.
Yeah.
And that
Wow.
that's the kind of communication lockdown that you don't see unless you're in a combat zone. I mean, that's just scary. And we think we have control over these companies because we can trade them on the stock exchange, and they seem happy and they give us all this free stuff. But man,
How are you feeling these days with the New York Times actually finally saying, "Oh yeah, it was real"? Any kind of vindication, or is it bittersweet? Too little, too late?
I think I said day late and dollars short. I think I said better late than never. I mean, obviously, like I'm a little pissed because October 15th, I came back from my lunch break, and there was three. I had the Times, New York Times, I had Washington Post, and I had CNN, all camped out in front of my shop waiting for me to get back. And by this time, I had talked to Bob Costello. He gave me some tips about trying to take control of a interrogation, if you will, or an interview. And so I felt a little bit more confident. Plus, I needed to repair the damage that my horrible interview from prior, which I didn't even know that was going on. It's hugely embarrassing. So never ever listen to it. I felt that I had the confidence to.
It's like our podcast, our early podcast episodes are very similar.
Yeah, you'll be embarrassed about us later.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
I saw a couple of those.
So you see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I ended up I said, hey, here's what happened. And I told him the story. I even offered to show him a signed authorization that I still had. I'm like, here's the sign off. They didn't, I knew they were never going to publish a single word I said. I think they were down there because they wanted to catch me in a lie. They were there hoping that I would say something that contradicted something from the day before, or say something that would incriminate or that would reveal something. They weren't there to get the truth. They were there to catch me. And then of course, last Wednesday, Times comes out. I'm like, well, you had the opportunity. I told you what happened. You didn't want to listen because you made a choice to block this information for your preferred candidate. And
John, I think the aspect of this story, of your story, that really draws empathy for me and probably for a lot of people is what kind of happened to you after. I mean, you've told us the story of the laptop and everything with the FBI, but then after that and everything that unfolded with the IRS and the lawsuit and the harassment and all this other stuff. Can you kind of tell us that side of the story?
Yeah, I fought Twitter, and Twitter won, I guess, would be a good song.
There we go. Right there.
Yeah. Well, everything looked great, and I've never sued anybody in my life. I'm the type of person I would rather resolve an issue face to face with diplomacy and responsibility than just hide. And I hope my lawyer doesn't. Oh shit! Hide behind a legal defense. Sorry, Brian. And so this was like almost everything in my life after October 14th. This was completely foreign and new to me as well. So, I just remember watching Dorsey in front of Congress say, well, yeah, we made a bad decision. We're sorry. I'm like, oh my God, everybody's calling me. I have voicemails. I have like hundreds of voicemails calling me a stooge for Putin, a Russian hacker. I'm going to rot in prison. The Kremlin thanks you. It's, to be accused of having a family that had fought during the entirety of the Cold War against communism, to have, to be labeled this and to have Twitter be the main perpetrator for that hacker moniker. And I told Brian, I was like, sue the ever-loving shit out of beardy hippie son of a bitch. So we tried. Everything would look like it was going good, and we actually beat 230. Hooray!
Nice.
So Twitter threw up the 230 protection. The problem was I don't own a Twitter account. I've never tweeted in my life. They authored that I was a hacker. Nobody else posted I was a hacker. Nobody else alluded. Nobody got the impression. Normally the protections that 230 would afford them would be afforded to them because they're the publisher, except they were the author of this defamation. And the first judge we had assigned to the case said, sounds good to me. And so we beat Twitter 230. And then I want to say sometime in May, the judge was too busy and they gave us an Obama appointed judge. And then that was basically said, I don't see anywhere that Twitter is alluded to. Case dismissed with prejudice, and you owe Twitter $175,000.
Which is just such a.
Well, I think it's an example.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like an FU.
Nobody's going to want to sue Twitter ever again, because look at what happens. You beat them at 230, but you still, you gotta go back to Delaware so you don't lose your house.
Have you talked to the lawyers? Sorry, Mike. Just because now with the recent revelations in the past week or so, is there any change in the legal possibilities?
Well, I don't think I'm going to go after Twitter. To be honest, I don't. It took a lot of the fight out of me as far as legal. When I knew the writing was on the wall with Twitter, I knew the case was going nowhere. I wanted the case. Not my lawyer said $500 million, which whatever, wishful thinking, But for me, it's the platform. I wanted to have the opportunity to defend myself, to justify my actions, and tell my story in a court of law, and have it. Even if we lost, it would still be there. It still would have made it, and it kind of did, but it didn't. And to prove that I'm not a hacker, I would have to ask the original person that hired me to do the job to acknowledge that, which would require Hunter to testify, and that was our plan. So it was kind of like it was all this wishful thinking, and I think that. When I realized that that's probably not the business I want to be in. And so I wrote a book. I took that frustration and that anger, and I was like, you know what, I think maybe now the last chance I'm going to have to actually tell my story and get it out there in my own way without having to rely on other people is going to write a book. So then I basically gave up on the legal fights. I've been cleared out. So it was focusing on getting the book published, which I just signed a deal. So that's how.
Congrats.
Good for you.
Good for you. So if I may, we do a lot of like weird, uncanny, but very accurate, guesses that things are going to happen. And I don't get a feel that this is the end of your story at all. Like this feels like the beginning of a paradigm shift. Like, yes, Twitter did that, but also this is a pretty huge, like you talk about pulling the Band-Aid off, but this is straight up ripping the Band-Aid off a 36-stitch wound and just exposing it to the world. I think that the more, like you say your book does well, it's going to open more eyes. This is going to set precedent for situations in the future. I don't think your story is over at all. I think you should be looking at a script later too, because something bigger is going to happen. And
I did hold on to the rights for TV.
Oh, I totally see you as like an Ed Harris with the Scottish hat, maybe playing
Tam O'Shanter.
Hold on. That's not good. I've given up on getting way too excited over things. During the past 2 years, it's like this roller coaster of like things might work out. Oh no, they didn't. Oh,
well,
FBI might help me. No.
I think this kind of story has a life of its own. I don't think you really need to do anything. I think you need to have a copy of that hard drive in every single state in the union. But outside of that, this thing's going to keep doing its own thing. I think. I don't think this is. It went away for like how many years?
It was about 17 months, and then it depends what conversation. Yeah, it depends what conversation sphere you're in. It's. Obviously, the mainstream media hasn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole, and now they're being forced to. And it's funny because 3 days ago, the Washington Post came out with an article, and it was like there's still two main points that haven't been cleared up: the chain of custody and the authenticity. And it's like, or the authenticity of the person that gave basically two attacks on me. So I got a little offended by that because I'm like, this is. Times comes out with this story, finally acknowledging that the laptop is real, but the Wall Street or Washington Post seems to double down.
But
today, though, go on.
No, I'm just saying that article from Washington Post. I read it too, and it's written, and I started reading it, and I was like, "This is Philip. This got to be Philip Bump." And it's Philip Bump and he's a clown. So no one takes, he's like the Brian Stelter of Washington Post. So no one takes that guy seriously.
Washington Post did reach out. They want to talk to me now. So I don't know if I want to talk to them.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, the whole thing is, it's like, what it doesn't do, it doesn't do you any good. There's plenty of other outlets like the Friends of Zeus podcast. There's other people that will let you talk.
So this is far more comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need those. You don't need those legacy people. I mean, I didn't need the New York Times to tell me that this was a legit story. I mean, it's offensive to me that after all this time on Thursday, the New York Times, like, we're all supposed to respect. I have zero respect for that organization. They have been wrong and purposely wrong and lying for years. So I don't care what they have to say. Now, as far as your book, which I do care about, so you had said that, so you had written this and you were looking for someone to publish it, and you just recently, like in the last week, found someone to publish it, or just
I've
for a while?
known for a while, because I finished writing it in about mid-September, and I figured I started writing the second book as well, because about this time I was packing up all my stuff in Colorado because I had to come back to Delaware, so it was kind of like, for me, it was like, well, this all my books so far seem to have bad endings. You know, my first book ends with me getting on a plane in exile, flying out to Colorado, have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. And here I am, now I'm back in Colorado and packing up my stuff to head back to Delaware, where I'm still not really certain on what the hell's going to go on. And the book for me was definitely therapeutic. And I definitely wanted to get it out there, but again, I've been turning screws, fixing Macs for 25 years. I've never written a book. I didn't know how the industry works, and I can Google so much, but I wanted to talk to somebody. And I ended up trying to reach out to Miranda Devine because her book was coming out November 30th. And I was really hoping that, you know, she has obviously a publisher that's willing to tackle the content. Even though our books are different, hers covers the subject matter of the laptop. Mine's the chain of custody. That's a little adventure trying to get it to the proper authorities, and then my life and what I had to deal with during that time. And I was hoping that it would be a good mix, but nobody was returning calls. Apparently in this industry, you need to have a literary agent because a publisher won't talk to you. They'll only talk to a literary agent, and then you got to get an editor first. So it was this big hot mess that it was foreign. And I think it was when Fox Nation reached out to me in December and to see if I wanted to do a part on their Who is Hunter Biden series. And I was like, you know what? I'm sure, why not? I need the exposure. Maybe this will help get somebody's attention. And so when I was getting interviewed by I was talking to the producer, and she was like, "Oh, Miranda Devine has nothing but nice things to say about you." And I was like, "Well, can I get her number? Because I've been trying to get a hold of her. I have a book that I've been trying to get out." And actually, that producer came through, and she put me in contact with Miranda, and then we both worked, or she did. Actually, she's phenomenal. She's really stepped up. Another friend of mine was able to get me in front of John Levine from the New York Times to do the story that came out like a week or so ago about the weaponization of, or the fallout from what I went through. And I think the combination kind of put me back on the radar enough that I was able to get a publisher and get everything signed, and it's moving along. And
that's awesome.
Everybody's really excited. We want to try to get something out before the midterms because I think it's important. I go into great length at my adventures with the FBI, and the when you lay it out and you see my actions and how they correspond with the cause and effect and the responses from our federal government, our mainstream media, you know, it's scary because then you can see how coordinated it is and how, you know, the impeachment was so important, and it had to be about Burisma because it's accusation through projection, or guilt through projection, I think.
Do you have a title for your book?
American Injustice.
Nice.
And it's not just, I mean, sure, it's what I went through, but it's the injustice that we all, whether you want to admit it or not, we all had the wool pulled over our eyes. You know,
I would agree.
We've been using Russia the same people that love to use Russia as an excuse are the same ones that penned a letter calling me a Russian operation. And they're the same ones that are trying to get us to get more involved in Ukraine. I mean, if you want a roll call for the deep state, I can point you to that letter. I would definitely love to have a conversation with those individuals.
And not with finesse. I mean, it's gotten to the point of just flat out bullying. Again, like not allowing people to talk about things, just shutting things down. I mean, it's not, it's not subtle anymore. It's brass knuckles, it's like very serious. So with the Twitter case, so that's over. You said you're not interested in really pursuing things in the legal context, at least for the moment.
Obviously, money's a big factor. I have a Give, Send, Go that a friend of mine set up for me. The book thing hopefully will bring in. I'm just trying to get to a point where I can comfortably reinvent myself, because I'm not going to. I don't feel comfortable about inviting the public into where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to advertise that I'm repairing Macs again in my community, I would have to run that risk of somebody that might want to do me harm coming in, knowing where I live or coming in my house. So I'm no longer afraid, but I am cautious, and I have to be careful. And so I am fixing Macs. I got a couple of dead ones behind me, but it's not nearly, it's 1/10 of the business that I had even during COVID. So, it's not gonna, I would like to do more and like I went to, when I was in exile in Colorado, I went to woodworking school so I could get better at something that's a hobby and maybe turn that into a profession. So I need a little time, and I need that time to reinvent myself. And I'm hoping that the Give, Send, Go and the book will afford me that opportunity. And then if some lawsuits come out of it, again, I'm at this point in the legal spectrum, I want to stand on principle and not money. I'm sure I want my lawyer, who, bless his heart, hasn't been paid a dime yet because he made a poor call by saying that he's going to do pro bono until I'm awarded something. So I feel really bad for him and his wife and his kids. But it's I'd like to get him taken care of. But for me, it's more the principle. I want somebody to tell Adam Schiff he's a liar,
Mm-hmm.
and he does not deserve the position that he's in the Intelligence Committee. I would love to be able to. I think my father would love to see that more than I would. But it's. I would like justice. I don't know what justice is.
Phenomenal Russian spy. I'm buying the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, one thing.
Here's my thing. If Don Lemon ever comes into your shop in the future and leaves a hard drive, I want a copy of that one because I want to throw that one out into the world.
That sounds gross.
That's one.
Yeah, I don't want to see that.
Well, one question, John Paul, with the Give, Send, Go, Tom and I were talking about this earlier. I mean, obviously we're gonna do what we can to help publicize that, but we were just wanted to confirm that the one that we saw, I think it was called Build Back Mac Isaac. Is that the official? Okay.
Yeah. My buddy Chad came up with the name because it's Build Back Better, a little jab at the.
I love it. No,
Love it.
we'll get that posted and we'll mention it, in future podcasts and things as well. I was interested when I read about you taking woodworking classes. Is that like for like furniture or like just general carpentry, or what were you?
I needed, like I have some weird hobbies. Let's see. I made these during COVID. I made these wooden fox. Remember those old wooden kits you could get at the Smithsonian of dinosaurs, and all the pieces slot together.
The die cut.
Yeah. Punch them out and you slot them, and hey, it's a dinosaur. And you never touch it again. I made all these foxes, about 7 or 8 of them, that were about 3 feet, about life size, and I would plant them down. And we have a park off the in front of my shop. It goes down to the Brandywine River, and people jog and exercise, stuff I don't do. They do it there. So I thought it'd be nice to so I like the art. I've always liked art. I've always considered myself a creative person. I love working in film and editing. There's just not a big demand for visually impaired graphic designers or videographers for some reason. So
Go figure.
yeah, I know. So it's kind of always been like a side thing. And then the woodworking, I love it because it's such a tactile medium. And so I've done a little bit of furniture restoration. I poured my first epoxy river table. I know they're kind of gimmicky, but I still think
cool.
Those are awesome.
I've made these plaques for these 3 squadrons in Vietnam. They get together every year for a reunion. And I've been privileged to go there every year for about the past 15 years to archive and film their stories. It's kind of like a hobby of mine. And so I call it my vacation, but I get to get drunk and listen to war stories. So it's perfect for me. And I made these plaques of all the different squadron insignia. And so they could raffle them off at their little auction thing. So it was stuff like that. You know, I want to do fine art, you know, whatever I can learn and get good at. Really,
I think if Hunter Biden can sell his artwork, you can probably sell your carvings.
Yeah, I thought about getting into painting, but my daddy's not president, so I some other assholes got that. I don't want
to. I was wondering, and I don't want to, you know, I don't know what your time is like, John Paul. I don't want to push you too late, but I did before we wrap up. I'm not saying we have to wrap up right now, but would you be open to coming on in the future, like a few months or whenever down the road, like maybe when your book comes out, just to say hi and catch up?
I haven't been Arkansas or Clinton or anything. So.
Well, I got you. Yeah.
No, I'm just
Afghanistan. The nomenclature here on the Friends of Zeus podcast is you would be Afghanistan. That's our term for when bad things happen.
To people that don't deserve it.
The people that don't deserve it. Yeah. No, like I said, there's so many things, how this affected. We didn't even get into, you know, just tangentially, like how this probably affected the 2020 election. I know at the time, that was front of my mind. I mean, why else would they have it shut down so much? You know, even if it changed a few people's minds. I mean, there's polls out there that say if people had fully known about this story, you know, less people would have voted for Biden. Who knows? But I think they understood that, which is why they tried to shut the story down. But I find that the interesting thing that you said that I hadn't even thought about is, you know, this was all billed as like an October surprise, but you know, you had been dealing with this since at least late summer of 2019. I mean, I know you had the laptop from April of 2019, but by the time you started realizing, hey, no one's coming to get this, I got to deal with it, you know, which was 14 plus months, you know,
there's no
before
doubt
the election.
The next election and coming into the next election that this will get some steam under it again. There's not a chance that it doesn't. There's too much.
And even when it came out, like it's funny, something that you touched on, John Paul, you know, the media really used the salaciousness of a lot of this stuff to kind of cover some of the other things that were a little more complicated and harder to understand, that would actually require like actual reporting by actual reporters. So it was, I know as a consumer of media at the time, it was like, it's just, you know, sex and drug stuff. People trying to throw it out there to, like, you know, make the Bidens look bad or whatever, almost as a way of, you know, shielding all the other stuff that was on there that was actually much more serious, you know, from view, because a lot of that didn't really start coming out till later. You know, at least it wasn't discussed.
You know, it's weird because I think of the whole group, I actually am the only one that did vote for Biden.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah. But some might say that I evolved and that I opinions. They would be assholes. The way I look at it is, as Tom explained it earlier, I'm just standing in the river and the water's moving past me. I'm still where I was. Everything's just moving it's shifting to a different place. The right is no longer the right, the left is no longer the left. We're just in the middle of all this nonsense. And I just happen to now feel like, yeah, not happy with anything. I'm not happy with any of them. I realize some people might be happier with like a Trump or whoever the next Republican. I might be happy with the next Republican, but yeah, man, your story amongst all the nonsense that's been going on over the last few years has shifted, or like I said, it's shifted, and I've kind of stayed where I am and going, no, I can't be part of that group anymore. No, we can't do these tribes anymore. It's got to be we the people, you know.
I don't understand. We can't appreciate the gray area that it's possible. You know, I used to describe myself as socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and you can't describe yourself as that anymore. People, that's just a
we need the pragmatist party. We need a party out there that just looks at what is there, deals with what is there, and then move on to the next thing. The
small government, wishful thinking. That sounds like efficiency, and I don't see that coming out of DC anytime soon.
You definitely would know.
Nope.
Do you, Tom or Jason or Jack or Zeus, do you guys have any lingering questions? I've got one really just kind of dumb one, but
I think we can let Mr. Isaac go soon. But any last questions from you guys?
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, this was just one I meant to ask earlier. I just forgot. The reports that the initial 3 laptops you brought in were like waterlogged. I always was thinking like, what's your like, and not that you would know, I have no idea, but how would 3 computers get waterlogged? Like, did a boat sink, or like were they thrown in a pool? Like
they smell like beer.
Any information on that? It just seems curious. It just seems curious. I mean, one, I understand, right?
Who hasn't bong water for some reason?
3 of them, I'm just like, what the heck's going on? Like, who would? Anyway, do you have any info on that?
In the IT world, there's certain conversations. There's certain things that we know go on and happen to customers' equipment.
Yeah.
We choose not to have these conversations. We choose to ignore. Like, that must be the dog that did that, or this is, So we typically, to get through the day, you don't kind of dwell on it. To be honest,
don't ask, don't tell, sort of thing.
Yeah.
These are personal products.
Yeah.
If you're a Mac owner, you love your Mac. Most likely, you may not love Apple, but you probably love your Mac.
Yep.
And you take it everywhere. You do everything with it. And apparently Hunter likes to smoke crack and bareback sex and film off his Mac at the same time. And when you put yourself in that kind of situation, which is impressive on some level, you're bound to have some form of foreign substance get on your computer.
Gotcha. Okay.
Did you run a blue light over it, or the CSI light over
Swab.
Again, we don't think about these things. We just kind of.
It turns out this was the perfect question to wrap up this episode.
Way to go, Mike.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
And I brought everything to a climax there.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So, John Paul, again, if you have any final things you'd like to say on this episode, but I'm just delighted to have you on. I think you're a really cool guy, and I really appreciate how candid you are, and I wish you luck. And like I said, we're gonna do what we can to publicize your Give Send Go account, and we'll be looking out for your book as well.
In fact, if I can probably speak for all of us, we'll until we see something that we like, let's just keep it on the bottom of there. We'll just
that's what I'm saying.
With every one of our descriptions.
That's what we're gonna do.
I appreciate you guys having me on the show, and I mean, to be honest, I have been more grateful to be a part of this country because of the overwhelming support that I've received from, granted, not too many people on the left, but the right, is that the people that are aware of what's happened, that are conscious to what's going on, and that have thanked me, has given me the strength to say, you know what, IRS come after me, whatever, I got to Give Send Go, so unemployment, they can screw me over too. I don't care, because I have this level of support that has put me in a position where I have confidence, and it gives me strength. So I'm grateful for that, because it wasn't always like that. And I just want to let everybody that listens to your show that has helped. Thank you.
Thank you, John Paul.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, you can take us out.
And stay on afterwards, buddy.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess we have been on for a while with John Paul, so I think it might be time we wrap things up.
Take care, everybody. See you next
All right.
time.
Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.